Betrayal doesn't always come crashing in like a thunderclap. Sometimes it arrives slowly, quietly, like a cold draft beneath a door that was supposed to be sealed. And for the INTP, who builds relationships carefully, thoughtfully, and with deep inner loyalty, betrayal is not simply the breaking of trust. It is the fracturing of a world they had already begun to build around you. You see, INTPs don't trust easily. They spend much of their life navigating the world through logic, reason, and observation. But beneath all that thought, behind all that analysis, there lives a heart that is far more tender than they often show. When they let someone in, truly in, it means they bypass their default filters. It means you've made it past the logic gates into the quiet and private sanctuary of their trust. And once you're there, they don't monitor your presence. They welcome it. They assume you're safe. They begin to believe that connection, however rare, can be real. So when betrayal happens, whether it's dishonesty, emotional manipulation, gossip, or a breach of private trust, it doesn't hit the INTP in one clean blow. It collapses the entire structure. The mental model they had for you, the map of shared understanding, the safe, quiet place you used to inhabit in their mind. And what happens next is not rage. It is withdrawal. Not out of anger, but out of deep, private grief. Because betrayal, to an INTP, doesn't just hurt, it disorients. They replay every word, every moment, every subtle sign they might have missed. They try to locate the fault. Was it me? Was it them? Was it inevitable? They don't want revenge. They want understanding. They need to make the chaos make sense. And until they do, they can't breathe freely again. But here's what few people understand. When an INTP is betrayed, they do not always show it. They do not scream. They do not accuse. They do not put on a dramatic exit. They vanish emotionally long before they vanish physically. They retreat into thought, into quiet, into a world where it's safe to feel again because no one else is allowed in. To the outside world, they may appear calm, cold even, but inside, they are grieving something real. They are grieving what could have been. They are mourning the version of you they thought they knew. And while many types experience betrayal as something external, something that changes the other person, INTPs often experience it internally. It shakes their perception. It makes them question their judgment, their instincts, their ability to trust their own mind. And that spiral can be far more damaging than the betrayal itself, because an INTP's mind is their sanctuary, their logic is their anchor, and betrayal corrupts both. It brings disorder where there was once coherence. It turns their inner world into a question they can't yet solve. This is why they need time to rebuild their maps, to recalibrate their filters, to regain their inner balance. And sometimes, in doing so, they shut the door, not in a rage, not with hatred, but with a quiet click of finality. When an INTP feels betrayed, the damage doesn't stay confined to the event itself. It seeps outward into memory, into reasoning, into the structures they once relied on to feel stable. And so, the betrayal becomes more than just a breach of trust. It becomes a rupture in the very logic that allowed them to feel safe around someone. INTPs value internal coherence, not just in ideas, but in people. They tend to believe that if a person is genuine, there should be a harmony between their words, their actions, and their energy. So when someone they've trusted violates that harmony, when promises are broken or truth is twisted, they feel not just hurt, but mentally destabilized, like reality has stopped lining up, and that feeling is unbearable. To recover, they often enter what seems like a cold state of detachment. But this isn't indifference, it's repair. They are combing through every memory, recontextualizing every interaction, trying to sort out what was real and what was an illusion. They can't move forward until they've re-established the architecture of truth inside their mind. And in this phase, they begin to restructure their emotional boundaries. The INTP doesn't lash out. They don't retaliate. But they do begin to revise access. The door that was once open, even if only partially, starts to close, bit by bit. Not as an act of punishment, but as an act of emotional quarantine. They cannot risk re-exposure until the system is clean again. This is why some people experience the infamous INTP slam door. It's not a theatrical gesture. It's a final one. A calm, rational assessment that says, this person no longer fits inside my life's logic. And so, without warning, the INTP exits emotionally, sometimes permanently. But here's what many miss. Before that door closes, they gave you chances. Silent ones, subtle ones. They tried to reinterpret your actions. They tried to believe in repair. They tried to explain things away using empathy, logic, even their own self-doubt. But when all those routes fail, when every mental model leads back to betrayal, they let go. And once they do not look back. This withdrawal often comes with a sudden emotional flattening, not because they don't feel anymore, but because they've stopped investing, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. They disengage from the outcome. They stop arguing. They stop trying to fix it. They stop hoping for understanding. And it's in this moment, when they seem the most cold, that they are actually protecting what's left. Because inside, there is still pain, still longing, still echoes of the connection that once felt promising. But INTPs know one thing for certain: logic without trust is dangerous. It turns analysis into paranoia, reflection into rumination, imagination into anxiety. So they cut off the source, not to feel powerful, but to regain clarity. There's a kind of grief that doesn't cry out loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand to be seen. It just settles quietly into the corners of the mind where logic used to live. That's the kind of grief INTPs experience after betrayal. To the outside world, it may seem like they've moved on, like they've shrugged it off and returned to their usual inner world of ideas and projects. But inside, there's a different story, one that unfolds in silence. INTPs grieve in thought. They revisit the relationship like a researcher returning to a broken equation, not because they want to revive it, but because they need to understand what broke. They replay conversations, dissect timelines, reanalyze patterns, not out of obsession, but out of emotional necessity. For them, healing isn't just about feeling, it's about making sense. And yet, there's a painful irony here, because while they're trying to reach clarity through thought, betrayal is messy, emotional, and often irrational. So the more they try to make it make sense, the more they realize that sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the betrayal was intentional. Sometimes it was careless. Sometimes it was just human weakness. But none of those options give them peace. So they withdraw, not just from the person, but from the emotional confusion that person left behind. And what most people never see is the quiet identity shift that happens next. INTPs may begin to redefine how much of themselves they share. They become more guarded, with their inner world. They lower their expectations for others. They raise the bar for who gets close. And while this might seem like growth, it often comes with a hidden cost, emotional solitude. They stop expecting to be understood. They stop assuming that people mean what they say. They start building emotional systems that run independently, free from the vulnerability of reliance. And while this gives them strength, it also isolates them, because underneath their independence is still a longing for someone who won't misuse their openness, someone who won't exploit their tendency to give people the benefit of the doubt, someone who can sit with their quiet, not try to fix it or fill it or decode it, just accept it. Betrayal teaches the INTP that not everyone deserves access, but it also teaches them something else, something far more painful, that being yourself doesn't always protect you. That logic can't always anticipate harm, that even the most carefully selected people can still cause damage, and that realization changes them, not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. They carry that lesson into future interactions, measured, cautious, controlled. They test before trusting. They withhold before revealing. They analyze before attaching. And all of this isn't because they've become heartless. It's because they remember. They remember how it felt to trust someone deeply, only to have that trust used against them. And their mind, which is always trying to protect them, adapts. After betrayal, INTPs don't rebuild trust the same way most do. They don't simply try again. They reprogram the way they relate to others. They become more observant, more analytical, more hesitant to assume that good intentions are enough, not because they've grown cynical, but because they've seen what can happen when they assume too much, too fast, too freely. Future relationships, even friendships, are filtered through the new architecture of caution. Where once there was curiosity, now there's a checkpoint. Where once there was instant connection, now there's quiet evaluation. INTPs begin to test people not in manipulative ways, but mentally, silently. They observe how consistent someone is with their words. They watch for small red flags others might miss. They listen not just to what's being said, but to what's being avoided, because now their mind is trained to detect cracks before they become collapse. This makes their relationships more selective, but it also makes them lonelier, because every time someone new enters their life, the INTP quietly wonders, will this be safe? Or will this become another blueprint I have to tear down later? They want to trust, deeply, desperately, but they can't afford another collapse of coherence. Their mind simply won't allow it. And so, even when someone has good intentions, even when the INTP begins to feel the first spark of hope, they'll hesitate. Not because they don't want to move forward, but because part of them is still scanning for risk. They'll downplay their emotions. They'll offer pieces of their inner world, then retreat just to see how you handle the silence. They'll analyze your reactions, not to judge you, but to test whether their logic can rest around you, whether their heart can be placed gently in the background without being forced to perform, because INTPs don't want constant emotional validation. They want relational integrity. They want to know that if they let go of control, the connection won't collapse. That if they're quiet, they'll still be seen. That if they speak, they won't be misinterpreted. That if they open the door again, they won't have to close it all over again. But even in their hesitation, there is hope. A soft, hidden hope. Because, as cautious as they become, INTPs are still idealists at their core. They still believe that real understanding is possible. that someone out there can meet them, not with force, but with gentle alignment, not with fireworks, but with slow burning trust. So even after betrayal, they wait, quietly, carefully, watching for that rare signal. You don't have to explain yourself here. You're already understood. In the end, betrayal doesn't just teach the INTP who to avoid. It teaches them who they are, what they value, what they can and can't tolerate in the space between self and other. They come out of it changed, not in dramatic ways that others can see, but in the quiet architecture of their inner world. Their definitions shift. Trust is no longer assumed, it's earned. Loyalty is no longer implicit, it's observed over time. And connection, it becomes sacred only given when the mind and the heart both agree. But through it all, one thing remains. The INTP doesn't stop loving. They just learn to love more intentionally, more quietly, more carefully, because betrayal never hardens them into bitterness. It doesn't turn them into someone cruel. It simply strips away the illusions. And in that space, raw, reflective, and silent, they begin to rebuild something more honest. They discover that their independence is not a shield. It's a refuge, a place where they can hear their own thoughts again, where they can restore their own sense of coherence without outside noise distorting the signal. And with time, they heal, not by forgetting, but by integrating the experience. They may never reopen the same door, but they learn to open new ones with better boundaries. They may never fully trust the same way again, but they trust more wisely. They develop emotional systems that are sturdier, relational instincts that are sharper, and even deeper reverence for truth and authenticity because they've seen what happens in their absence. And slowly, something beautiful happens. They begin to realize that betrayal didn't break them. It revealed them. It peeled back what was untrue. It made space for something more aligned, more resilient, more real. They start to see that the slam door wasn't an ending. It was an act of self-preservation. A line drawn not from hate, but from love. Love for peace, for honesty, for the integrity of their mind. And maybe that's the quiet triumph of the INTP after betrayal, that they don't become jaded. They become refined, more discerning, more self-aware, more loyal to the parts of themselves that used to be so quick to accommodate others. So if you're an INTP who's been through it, who's closed the door and carried the weight of confusion, guilt, or grief, know this: you didn't give up. You protected what matters. You didn't shut out the world. You made space for truth. You didn't harden. You evolved. And maybe you're not ready to trust again. Maybe you still carry echoes of that wound. That's okay. Just remember, you're not cold. You're careful. You're not distant. You're deep. You're not broken. You're aware. And one day, when someone comes along who sees that, who doesn't try to rush your thoughts or crack you open, but simply stands with you in quiet mutual respect, you'll know. Because your mind will rest, and your heart will remain intact. This isn't just about personality. It's about honoring how your mind moves, how your heart listens, and finding a life that doesn't betray either one.